from ABC 15 News, and it says meat processing plants shutting down nationwide, possible devastating impact on Arizona ranchers. And I'll be honest with you, I've lived in Arizona most of my life, and I was not even aware that ranching was that big of a thing in Arizona. So it says concern is spreading among Arizona ranchers as meat packing plants across the country continue to close, with workers falling ill with coronavirus. Several meat processing facilities have closed across the country in recent weeks, ranchers told ABC 15. This has created an oversupply of livestock, which has led to a sharp decrease in cattle prices and has threatened profits. And so basically what's happening right now is these ranchers are basically selling their beef at bargain basement prices. And this could wipe them out. We're talking about, I think, a lot of smaller ranchers. We're not talking about the huge commercial ranchers necessarily, although they'll obviously be affected as well. But it's kind of like a perfect storm because on the one hand, you have all these processing centers that have been infected with the COVID-19, and they're literally shutting down. They're literally shutting down the slaughterhouses. And so getting the meat to market is becoming more and more difficult. And when they do get it to market now, they're facing they're in a classic oversupply issue where they have got too much meat and not enough processing capability to deal with the meat. And this relates also to Congressman Massie's Prime Act, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, Pete, but he's been advocating for that for years. And basically what the Prime Act is all about is to try to allow intrastate commerce, basically take away all the federal regulations for intrastate. In other words, if you're not going out of state and you're simply, perhaps you're trying to get your beef to the local farmer's market, basically what Massey's trying to do is get those federal regulations out of the way. It doesn't stop the states from having their own regulations. They can regulate as much as they want. But what it does is it makes it a little bit easier for the rancher to get beyond that middleman where they're getting directly to the consumer so they can sell some of this excess beef instead of euthanizing their cattle or other extreme means to deal with the oversupply issue. And this is something that's funny. Again, Massey's been advocating for this for years. He has bipartisan support on the issue. But it's like now the cows are really coming home, literally, where it's like, we need this right now. This would be very, yep. The chickens are coming home to roost, and these ranchers are in dire need of this kind of reform. My brother actually goes to our local farmers market, and I'm lucky enough to live in a state where our farmers market has not been affected. We haven't been shut down by a tyrannical governor or a tyrannical mayor. So it's a nice thing, and it's something that should be supported. And with people that talk about wanting to go green and all those kinds of things, well, I think this is a great way to quote unquote, dial down your carbon footprint. Massie, in a video I saw, describes, because he raises cattle and sells them. He talks about the process of having to go to an FDA approved processor that's like 3 hours away from his house, when there's a local, there's a local processor, a local slaughterhouse that doesn't have an FDA guy there all the time, and he can't use them. He just can't use them unless he's doing all this other different kinds of things. It's an interesting issue, and it's one that's kind of exposing, again, some of these kind of flaws that were already there. In this case, in something that's absolutely essential, which is the food chain, with the food supply chain. And a lot of people have been concerned about this, and this is potentially something that could cause some real havoc, not just for the ranchers, but for people in general, in terms of just getting meat, having meat available.
Yeah, I saw on Facebook today, somebody was saying that they were buying, I don't know if it was a side of beef or an entire cow, but they were buying it directly from the rancher in Arizona. I suppose you throw that cow or the meat on the back of your truck and you drive it back to Phoenix and hope it's okay on the hour, 2 hour, 3 hour drive. I guess that's what you have to do, but everybody in Arizona can't consume all of this beef if they're exporting it, unless, I don't know, you're having hamburgers and steak every day. You just have to go. You're going to go beef crazy if we're going to keep the farmers afloat.
Well, one thing that Massey explained was under the current system, the way they do it is literally they freeze pretty much the entire cow and give you the entire thing. And that's the only way they can do it. And he mentioned that the only people that can really afford that are wealthy people with huge walk-in freezers and things like that, that they're the only people that can really deal with that. The individual person can't. So obviously what the individual person wants is just a couple pounds of a prime cut, or maybe they want hamburger or whatever it is that they want, whatever cut they want. And that's it. They want a couple pounds and want to go home. Under the current regulations, the current regime, that's just not possible with your local rancher. It just doesn't happen because of the FDA and federal regulations. You just can't do that.
Sure, but right now the farmers are really in a bad spot. They have to dump these, and they're dumping these cows at not quite pennies on the dollar, but at deep discounts because of precisely what you said. Most people can't afford to buy that much beef at a time at whatever it is, $5 or $10 a pound, depending on the quality, I suppose. But yeah, they're taking a bath, so they're willing to sell it for far below the normal market price just because the alternative is to get nothing for these cows.
Yeah, exactly. So they're kind of stuck between the rock and the hard place.
Yep, bad situation. And this is exactly the kind of dislocation that we were worried about. As you know, as we've been talking about it, people are saying, "Oh, the economy's fine; it's going to bounce back." But what do you do about these farmers that suddenly they can't get people to process their their meat, or they can't get people to pick their vegetables, and so they're rotting, and they're depending, especially if you have farm fields. You don't have you're not picking crops every single day. There are seasons when you need to pick crops, and there are seasons when you're growing. And so if you miss one of your harvests, that's an enormous hit. You're probably not economically prepared for that.
Yeah, this article actually talked about that a lot of these ranchers, they only have 2 or 3 times a year to make money.
Yep.
Based, I guess, on the age and stuff of their herd and all that kind of stuff. So it's the same kind of situation.
Yeah, so it's a third or half your income for the year is just gone.
Exactly, exactly, or severely reduced if you're lucky.
Yeah.